said, okay, by the summer of, you think you may have gone to school at SMU for the first session.
Maybe. I got there
When
in
you were-
time and finished the
while you
first
were
session
working at the
in
chicken.
June. I might have got there in May, see.
But by, you think at least by
notice-
midsummer you're
The
interested in
notice
this.
for the Southern School for Workers appeared in the American Guardian and said to be in Asheville, I believe at a date in July. So I had to pull out and go.
You decided to go, leaving your job?
No. First, the only job I had was on the farm, which meant room and board. That's all she gave me. Room and board, no cash. And it was a very heavy job. The worst of it was the mixing and feed. Because I had to use her vehicle to haul 100-pound sacks from the feed store and 10-gallon milk cans, which I picked up at the big dairies. What are you looking at?
Yes,
Where are
well, we're up to, you're only getting room and board where you are, and how hard the job is because of the
Well, yeah,
weight.
I'm in this current events club. Maybe this is the time I meet Mike Evans and maybe Mike Collins, some more people through the current events club at the Y. Men and women are in it. I think it's at the YMCA. And it's called that, so it attracts people for discussions. And I know somebody asked me, would I like to meet Thomas, but some of the people present were Thomas. And I was surprised to see how nice and attractive some of the people were who were introduced to me. We became, I invited them out. They were interested in my knowledge of, what I was doing out there. They would like visiting for half a day, help me throw sacks around or do something. One was an artist. Can't place them all there. One was something else, but they were all in this current events. Then, in that club, I met a woman. Her name was a fat woman, Saudi telephone operator. She might have, in my opinion, later, I got a pretty clear opinion she was like an FBI agent or something observing the group. I didn't have it at first. And that only came from the fact that she inquired a lot but never had any views of her own. And my judgment might be bad on it. But I was stupid enough and naive enough to talk to her about it. She immediately volunteered to enroll in the Southern School for Workers, which should have been. I didn't have the suspicion yet, you see.
You mean you told her about it?
Where I was going, she said, I'd like something like that. And she ended up in the car with me on the trip. I think that was 38. Could have been 38, could have been 39. She was a woman older than me by probably 10 to 15 years. I don't know. She seemed someone I was not at all interested in. That wasn't the issue.
That was a long way to drive, wasn't it?
Oh,
For a
yeah.
school like that?
You know what gasoline was? 10 and 11 cents a gallon.
That wasn't the issue.
Oh, and that was
That's
all.
a lot of money.
Everything else you fixed yourself, pretty near. You fixed your own flats. You never bought new tires. You bought inner tubes and you bought patches. You never bought an inner tube. You couldn't afford it either. If you could fix a little patch. So you carried all that stuff with you, see. If your battery went dead, that didn't worry. You hand cranked your car. My car, hand crank. You crank up in front. You break your arm with, you could start it, turn the motor over, start it over. What are you looking for?
Can you stop and
Well, you better stop and see.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how you could afford to do that. How could you just leave your job like that? And go
Well, first was sharing
cross-country?
expenses. Second was they gave me a scholarship. And I believe they forwarded me some expenses.
Why would
gave
they
me
give you a scholarship?
Tuition free.
I mean, you applied for something?
Oh, it was board where I was going. It was room and board at the Asheville Normal School, which was a teacher's college, and the rest of the year it was the campus of Asheville. They wrote me a whole letter
I mean,
explaining
it was
all that.
connected to Dallas, you know?
Dallas?
How would they know about you? How would they...
I wrote them a letter. I told you all this a while back.
Well, how would you qualify though, for a scholarship?
By writing them a letter. Telling them your background, where you'd worked.
So you didn't have to worry because you...
This was not an academic thing. This was a workers' school. Where
So you
had
just
you
said
worked?
you were interested in...
Where had you worked? And what had you done? And how had you shown your interest in the labor movement? I forget what they told me in the letter to write them a letter explaining.
Do you know who
They didn't want an
sponsored it?
application.
Who was
That was them.
Who?
Southern School for Workers had a board of
It's
directors.
like an institution. Okay.
Well, it didn't have a campus. It had to be behind the campus. And for the years I was connected with it, it was Asheville. Earlier, it had been other places.
What
like
was
the
it in
Baptist
Asheville?
or
What?
Methodist homes in the western part of the state, or somewhere else like that.
What was it in
The
Asheville?
background was YWCA industrial secretaries were the leaders. Is that what you mean?
No, I mean, what was it? Where were you physically in Asheville? When you got there, what was
On the
it?
campus of Asheville Normal School, a teacher's school. A teacher's school.
I think there's some pictures of...
No, there are Asheville pictures. There should be with some Ernie Jones, with Buddy goes there in '39.
She didn't go there this summer.
No, the first summer. In fact, I'm not sure Ruth. What was her name? Ruth? It was the first name, that fat woman.
The one who drove out.
Yeah, fat woman. She might have been in '39, not '38. I don't remember if I went alone in '39.
You went 2 years in a row.
Well, they asked me back as staff the second year.
How long did you stay?
So they paid me $50 for the summer and room and board.
The second
And I
year.
got Buddy enrolled, and I got a bunch of other people enrolled. I'd become like a staff person. They give me $50
Okay, well,
for
let's go back to
expenses.
the first year. Now, the first year, you were just a regular attending. You were on scholarship. You attended.
Well, they're going to give me a scholarship
what was
because how
it
else would they get people to go
Well,
there?
well, what was
Without
it
giving
about?
them
What was it
tuition
for
and-
and everything? What was
Without
what
giving
did
them
you
tuition
study?
and board, when no one would go there. That'd be the beginning point of it.
I guess I forget. What did
It's
you
the
study?
middle of the Depression. You're not going to
Yeah.
start going to work elsewhere.
What did they have you study and talk about?
Oh, I had excellent teachers. Superb faculty.
It was run by labor people, sort of, from CIO?
Labor connected, but not labor. The people turned out to be far greater than I could have understood if they'd sent me their names in advance and their biographies, because they wouldn't have known anything about it. Later, I understood their story, role, as I came to know them. The teacher of economics was Leo Huberman, a very
I didn't know that's where you first met him.
no. My God, I almost took my breath away.
I didn't know that's where you met him.
I met him, he was there, as a teacher. Economics, history, those subjects. And he was full professor at Columbia University's new college, a sort of version of Black Mountain, a very free-swinging division of Columbia. He was also a very well-known author of We the People. I didn't know any of this thing.
He
I
was a
forget
stranger to
something.
you.
A book on economics and other things. One on history, one on economics, so forth. And a leading Marxist scholar. I didn't know any of these things. You see, I'm having the equivalent of a small stroke right now. I've got to be very aware of it. My right eye has got a huge blot out in it. It's stroked out.
So I turned this
Big
off.
portion of it. No. It's turned black. It only lasts 2 or 3 seconds. It's a mini one of these. had them. It should not last very long, or there is something wrong. Still there. It can give you a sensation of dizziness if you try to keep your eyes open. He was a social scientist, whatever you'd call that division. Then there was, I'd later learned a tremendous family I came to know. But this is where I first met the first member of it. You finished? You all right?
Mhm.
God bless you. Anything else?
No.
Mildred Price taught English. Something like that. None of these things meant what they said they meant. Because the lessons would really be on the Wobblies, on the early Eugene V. Debs movement amongst railroad workers.
It's all labor.
They'd be
history.
excerpts from, they give you readings, they give you outlines, and they'd make it very rich and colorful. Keep your attention very high. Her English was never English, that would have been more. I don't remember what she did.
Had
Maybe
this
she
school
didn't
been
teach
going
that.
on several years, or was it a
It was
new
the
idea?
former Southern School for Industrial Women Workers, and had been converted to the Southern School for Workers by the time I got there.
Uh-huh.
Maybe up to the airport.
So it had a tradition behind it.
Of what I just described. Industrial YWCA secretaries were the foundation of it. The director was, for instance, Louise McLaren, a very prim, black-haired, what do you call when they tie their hair down very tight on their skull? Long tail, even though she was about 60 years old then. That was Louise McLaren, the director. And she had several more hangers on there that were like her from various Ys
Yeah.
that sent their students to her. Meaning that if they were in Roanoke and found a person who was open-minded, want to learn about things, she'd encourage them to send them to school. Or if they came, Alton Lawrence's wife, Ida Nunley, whom he married, she was there that first summer. She came out of the Huntsville, Alabama cotton mills, and had a tradition
Where did
of
Alton come
union.
out?
He was there. He was a totally different background.
He didn't marry her soon after
Later. All this
that. You
occurred
met
later.
her before him.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
You met her that first time?
Yeah, she was a student, fellow student, 38.
How many of you were there?
I was the youngest, and the oldest student was a picture you'll see of him, a white-haired man from the Southern Arkansas Sharecroppers Union. I don't remember his name, I knew it like intimately. I have photographs with all of them in the picture. Then they had student assistants. Joel Layton was a student assistant from one of the greater universities that I remember. They had some of those around, besides the faculty. I named two of the faculty. The third taught dramatics, which meant that she must have taught us writing and how to analyze things and reading and so forth. That was Bill Wolfe from Chicago. Now the Prices, Mildred Price was one of a band I came to know intimately. At least four of the Prices I knew very well. They were a distinguished North Carolina family, not meaning wealthy, not meaning aristocratic, anything on that order. Just beautiful people. Enoch Price and I worked together for years in Greensboro. He was my boss, and he was the editor of the Greensboro Patriot.
This is in later years.
By 39. And Mildred, there was Mary I worked with. She ran for governor on the Progressive Party ticket. You remember as a
I
child,
remember
Mary
the
Price.
name.
Branson Price was the head of the Progressive Party in Georgia. And then that's, say, four I've named right there. And then Mildred herself was married to a very distinguished journalist by the name of Harold Coy, C-O-Y, very well known in the labor press and in Mexico and certain other things that whatever he was specialized in. And then there were four. One was a vice president of of the big steel corporations, Kaiser Steel. Others held very distinguished positions like that. Family of 8. They were raised on a farm, and they had all those great, wonderful traditions, but of a well-managed, they all were put through college. They were from a family that cared, and
had some wherewithal to carry around.
they had the wherewithal, which other families did not have. I mean, how could Mother
How
have
could you
gone
say
there
your
if she'd
mother
have wanted
didn't
to go
care,
there,
right?
huh? How could Buddy have gone if she'd wanted to? When she was picking cotton and stunted at that period of her life. How could I have fought my way? I mean, I fought one way out. Others would have buckled down and got a scholarship and done something differently than I did, to prove themselves. I did it my way to get out of where I was. I admired
How
the
long
crisis.
how long did it go on? This
And that
school?
was Bill Wolfe, was a dramatist. God, he taught us.
Was it 6
He turned
weeks
all
or
of this
was it-
into play acting, role playing. I recognize now what he was doing. I didn't then.
No.
He had everybody involved, the whole class involved. Don't read it. Don't read the play anymore. Now just do what you did, Ad. Tell the goddamn boss what you just told him in Huntsville that day. You said you told him. Take it and shove it, okay? When he asks you what did you say, you now answer that, but don't answer the play anymore. Soon he'd have them doing the whole thing. Oh, they were greatest teachers. See, we'd put on these plays. You'd learn from putting on plays. You'd learn from... I can't think of all the things. I'm going to pick the lines. Now, Asheville was a hotbed for many things. First, it was the home of Thomas Wolfe, whom I didn't know from that. In later years, I read about him. I realized he was a novelist. But I went with the others, the faculty, to Dixieland to see his mother's boarding house. Yeah, he was still there, as it probably still is preserved. See, and it was still... He died that fall. So that, we went up and introduced ourselves. I don't remember who said what. I mean, she took us through the place. And I don't remember anything about it very much because I was not interested in it, And then the Silver Shirts, a fascist Klan organization, were headquartered in Asheville. William Dudley Kelly was the leader of the Silver. They wore silver shirts. Otherwise, were indistinguishable from Nazis, except had like an all-American emblem, like today USA or something, right? Patriotic and so forth. Christian, whatever, they had a cross. And otherwise, they did the Hitler salute. They did everything. They were all-American fascists. They were there. We used to go watch them in their basement. They had a whole large basement there, and printing presses in and all. We were like spying on them. Little. That's where I first got really drunk. I never got drunk with you, Charlie. And one night, 6 kids went out for beer. And I don't know what did it. I think it was because I ordered ale. Somehow I turned my head. That first ale I ever drank, everybody kidded me. First thing I knew, I was sick as a dog. I ran up behind the place and vomited, I was ashamed of myself. Because we looked like they were...
just what size group was it? It's like how many of you were there and how long did it
I'd
last?
say about 25 or 30 students.
It lasted what?
And it lasted maybe 6 weeks.
So it was a pretty good
It was from middle of July to maybe end of August, if I had to guess. And you had to write things. I did a study. I'll show you the kind of studies I did. They let you use their books. They brought a library with them. All that, which was all labor stuff and left stuff. And one of my studies was on Elizabeth Gurley Flynn. And she was a great Mobley leader. And a friend of Joe Hill's, who died in 1915 before Utah firing squad. And in my piece of research on it, I showed her entering a drawing, which I created. I didn't try to draw, but made figures of her entering Wobbly Heaven. I had Wobbly Heaven up there, the symbols, to see of her going to heaven. Poor Leo and them, they just tickled the faculty to death. I said, look at this Gurley Flynn. She's not only not dead, she is a leading member of the Communist Party's National Executive. She was one so wobbly, you can hear create this whole fantasy out of reading about her back in 1915. You know, all this 1905.
You thought she died.
Well, yeah, what could happen to a person from
What do you do?
1915 to now, you know? They have to all have died, right? I didn't think of Leo as being alive in 1915. You know, he was.
Sounds great. Sounds like he'd be very old.
Well,
At that
he didn't
age.
know anything. Young, you're strong, you live forever. You know?
Yeah, right. Well, so then this school ends, and what'd you do? You and this lady you drove it out with, the older woman. Did you drive back together?
I forgot my name.
Or did you
My
leave?
name fellow student.
Did you leave her
My
there?
buddy. I left my buddy out of it.
Oh.
Richard Holyfield.
Well,
Because he's going to be the link to the future and next year.
fellow student.
They liked me very much. They publish a songbook. I write some songs.
Is that what you saw?
Not that just that one. I wrote several.
Uh-huh.
I wrote one that was recorded by the Library of Congress there.
What was the name of it?
One on John Nance Garner, the vice president.
Uh-huh.
He was hated by working people for betraying Roosevelt.
Uh-huh.
And that was to the tune of Strawberry Roan, and ridiculed. I'll show you that. That's a song that was published a few times in different papers.
Mm-hmm.
Then that piece you saw, I probably did in 39, not 38, but I did the one on Garner in 38, and I did another one or two. And there were a lot of people followed a school like this, like Highlander Folk School. This was followed too, although Highlander had a stationary, permanent site, and therefore had great advantages over this
You mean
one.
Highlander modeled itself on this school?
No, I
or-
never said that. I said it had great advantages
I thought
over.
you said it followed it.
No. No, they were very much alike. They were very much alike. That this school, Highlander had a site, a place, Monteagle, Tennessee. This school was always going to have to lease someplace space. And so I'm headquartered in New York for the winter and raise money haphazard. Highlander was going to become more of a success even if it had body blows on the other side.
Well, I think. Okay. So maybe we could just.
Well, now whenever you were here, I don't remember, a month ago, when you were recording,
Yeah.
this is whatever today is, I don't know. No, it's my birthday.
That's right.
You're here
Happy
for my
birthday, by the
birthday.
way.
November
We
9th.
forgot because we celebrated.
Yeah, right. And you've just let me hear the end of that one where I'm telling about a fellow student, Richard Holyfield, and I. No, I had told Grace Call, which was the name of that telephone operator, that, I don't know, was always so silent. I sort of suspected her after a while, when I got less naive, that she had been too fast and on the trigger and all. And she was in that current events club, and then she suddenly, as soon as I mentioned this school, 10, 15 states away, she was ready to attend it. Well, when I thought about it later, some kind of FBI agent or other kind of company thing. And Richard Holyfield was a light-hearted, very pleasant kind of guy that I began buddying around with, drinking beer.
He was at the school.
In the
right?
school
Yeah.
in 1938, along with, I don't know if I told you about the other students, there were auto workers there from the assembly line of the UAW, which had just organized in Atlanta. They had recruited some good students as they went from a women's school to a mixed school. There's just some of the later black schools, went over mixed to women's schools. And Richard and I slowly made a decision. He told me about the hosiery workers' drives. He was a hosiery worker.
the union drives in North Carolina, around Charlotte, and textile workers union drives in the cotton mills, and it seemed like where a lot of the action was where we were. The school was over, or ending, and I had this old beat-up 31 Chevy, and between us, we had enough in gas to get down there, and he said we wouldn't lack for anything. He knew a union organizer named Cole, C-O-L-E, Dannenberg, D-A-N-E-N-B-U-R-G. Cole Dannenberg was one of a family of German-descended hosiery knitters from Philadelphia who had been blacklisted in the 20s, and a whole colony of them had moved to Durham, North Carolina. And they lay low, they kept their group together, and as the CIO broke out, they resumed their union activity 10, 15 years later after being blacklisted in Philadelphia and going south.
They kind of kept together and kept meeting and stuff.
Well, they were an ethnic group. They had a culture. Rose Dannenberg, his wife, was from a Pollock German family of knitters. And the industry had changed from very skilled knitting into into machine operations, and was ripe for assembly line organization on an industrial model, the CIO model. Even though they were a craft union called the American Federation of Hosiery Workers, they had nothing to do with the AFL-L's craft outlook. They were an industrial union. They'd organized all hosiery workers. They didn't separate knitting machine operators, different skills from others. Anyway, he was telling me about those things, and if he'll have room, he'll put us up somewhere. Anyway, we started out, drove on down from the mountains into Charlotte, and the Dannenbergs were pleasant, put us up, I don't remember, for dinner, for night or something. And we just became leg men, sort of hanging around an older man, Cole Dannenberg, who had a wife and 2 children, seems to me the 2 children were somewhere around 5 to 10 years old at that time. And we were both just single guys, scot-free. Now the car had problems, my Chevy, but those were days in which we might take it apart, have it in pieces laid out there for 3 days while we found an old wrecked joint and got maybe a universal joint out of it and put in a new universal joint, and then it would run again, You just didn't go get a car repaired or something. You didn't have any cash to do anything with. And Rose Dannenberg was a sort of skimpy, tight-fisted person who had been raised in a hard way. Yeah, she served us, the kids, regular milk, and we got Blue John. She knew how to pour it off a non-homogenized, which was all right. It didn't do us any harm. And I'd learned that with chickens, that they were getting the water, actually, the whey, W-H-E-Y in those 10-gallon cans, but they could fatten on it and they could get strong. And she occasionally got us a piece of penny candy or something, because she knew we didn't have anything. And we'd roam around. I went to look for work every morning at a place called Lance, L-A-N-C-E, very large factory, maybe 1,000 workers. You'd just go down there every morning and see if they were hiring, go to certain cotton mills. Then you'd come back. Cole Dannenberg might have a leaflet he wanted to give out on 3 o'clock shift with him, so he'd cover all the gates. We'd do legwork with him. I don't know whether he could put in for an extra meal for himself or something, to try to cover whatever we were costing him. We weren't costing him much, except that
He was actually CIO,
he was a CIO organizer
the official
for
job and
the,
everything.
for the American Federation of Hosiery Workers. He was a hosiery organizer. And then they had a strike on, I don't remember what it was right then or later, at Nebel, N-E-B-E-L Knitting Company at one of the hosiery plants. Very bitter strike. A very bitter German anti-union owner had come down and was going to destroy the union, and he had done it in the 20s, and they struck him. And I can't remember if that strike was, well, a little after we, later on, or whether it was, it could have been that I moved to Charlotte later, and then, yeah, I think the Nebel knitting strike came in a later period of my life, a year or two later. This is still 38. It's through Richard Holyfield that I'm to meet Buddy, actually, in a very strange and way, and showing the unevenness and the sort of craziness of young kids, and how little it is like the textbook stuff on communism, or how you get attracted or disattracted to it. Richard says there's a
What about a chair like that? You wanna
real
sit?
nice guy named Bart Logan, who's the head of the Communist Party here, the district organizer. You're going to like him and so forth, and that's fine, you know. That's the way everything is. You're going to like an organizer, you're going to like a socialist, you're going to like a communist, especially
It's all
Wobbly.
personality.
Remember, Richard is telling me all about his father this whole time, who is an old Wobbly.
Oh,
His father was in all the free speech fights of San Diego 1912, all of the filling of the jails in San Diego, all the legends of the Wobblies his father was in. He
Oh, I
drifted
see, yeah.
until he was about 40 or so before he started a family and became a caretaker in North Carolina. And Richard and all of them were later children of a very white-haired man when I met him. So his father was a legendary sort of Wobbly rank and filer, drifting with the wheat crop in the West and all that. So he says, we'll go up there. Well, we'll stay at my father's, and we'll hitchhike into Greensboro, where he stayed, where Bart Logan is. And his place was near High Point, in the country near High Point. His father lived above about a 5-car garage that some very wealthy person had, and they were like in the house servant quarters above the garage, and the man was not there. He was in Florida or something. This was maybe they went there in September, I don't remember. And when they went away, or where they were, or they might have been abroad, it could have been anywhere. They might have had several homes, but they were out in the country from High Point. But anyway, we stayed around Charlotte. Then on the weekends, as I remember it, my car, I think it was still laid out waiting for the universal. We hadn't found the universal clutch part, universal joint. So we couldn't go anywhere. So we hitchhiked. In those days, the truckers were not supposed to pick you up. Now they're very rigid about it. You can stand out on the highway and they generally won't pick you up. But in those days, some of them were still new to the rule, and they broke it for company or something. So after a while, even the big truck line guys would stop for you. Some of them would. And we got on up the road. We stayed with Richard's house. They made you put you up. And he had a sister who began to make goo-goo eyes. And she was a silly thing. He was dating some guy who I couldn't figure out what he did for a living. It took me a while. Maybe not that weekend, another weekend up there before I asked him exactly what a checker was, you know, like a Woolworths. It turned out he was to catch the employees and get them fired. He would go in and have a certain amount of money to spend. If they rang up, he gave them 50 cents, and they rang up money and didn't put a dime of it into the register.
Oh, I see. Checked out.
He was a checker who got him fired. And that's all he was after. I mean, his score went up as he got more of them caught at something. There's something they did wrong with him. So, you know, early on you began to realize how the system worked in terms of it was in his interest to catch somebody to set him up because, and he was a nice-looking red-haired kid, as I remember, and all-American little boy was just a checker-upper, just a think, getting people fired. Anyway, we hitchhiked over to Bart Logan's, and we went in, and that isn't the way we did it. That isn't what happened. I got it wrong. We didn't go to the house. We got to the house. We didn't go there first. There was a conference. There were always conferences going on. There were later student worker conferences in Durham that were very significant, run by the Southern School for Workers during the winter, which I attended too. And those were interesting because the workers from the locals came, and the students were the people from Duke and Carolina and other institutions, including the black institutions. North Carolina College, St. Augustine's.
The sponsorship was by the same school.
Yeah, the
that you
Southern
went
School
to.
for Workers sponsored student-worker conferences. And in fact, they published 2 of my songs, either that year or the next year, in their songbook, because by then I had a guitar along, and I'd been playing guitar, and these were always makeshifts. You took an old hymn and you wrote the words to a Seattle song to it or something. They appear in some of these songbooks you have around here. They never became anything very significant. One of Buddy's should have caught on well. She did a very nice one. That is, We'll Understand It All By and By. That's one of the much better ones. Mine was very timely then, was about John Nance Garner, who was a hateful figure in 39. Not right then, not in 38. So none of this happened in 38. Some of it I'm mixing up with 39 and 40. In 38, we go over to some kind of conference along this line at Greensboro. And there's labor people there. And he introduces me to Belle. Now, I'm going to get everybody confused because to me, the sisters looked alike and all, but, and she invites us home afterwards during the break or something. So we attend the conference. Remember, we've hitchhiked in, we picked up some food at his place, but you sort of always are mooching off of people because maybe somebody's got money for coffee and a
But
donut.
Richard Holyfield already knew Belle.
Yeah, he knew him. He did the introducing. She invites us to the house. So afterwards we go to the house. And there's a little baby, which is Laney then, in a crib. And so you come through the house, as I remember it. I'm following Richard. And he says hello to Belle over the crib, or what I take to be Belle. And I say, hi, you got home before we did. And it's Buddy. I don't realize him. Turns around and says, I don't even know you. So how could I have got home before you? And so that was the first put down, and there would be many others, of course. And so he explains to me that that's her kid sister, who's come up from the farm in Kennesaw, Georgia, and is staying with her. She's in a big opportunity lab in Greensboro, North Carolina.
Do you mind if I get a little more jelly?
No, get it.
Should I stop? Okay. I'm back with the jelly.
Anyway, so that's my first sight of Buddy. You might say it was love at first sight, but it was close to it, but it occurred probably during the evening of some kind. It occurred during the evening of some time that I found her very attractive and so forth. And not necessarily making goo-goo eyes at me, but very subtly her presence was being felt. And
Do you think she noticed you, so to speak?
I kind of thought she did anyway.
She must have
Bart
really-
was the ever cynical, ever humorous. He was the oddest, I found it very odd he could be a communist official. He said He was sort of cynical, wry sense of humor, very dry and ironic
I remember that.
sense of humor that was very unusual for most people who encountered him. He'd had a very interesting 1920s experience of sailing on big private yachts as a seaman for wealthy families who ported into Monte Carlo and Riviera, you know, where he had come to be a sophisticate of French, you know, culture and society, not sophisticate as much as another wry observer, you know, of everything. So very impressive to very young boys, you know. Well, it isn't anything like a French whorehouse. I mean, you know, anything he might state, you know, I didn't know whether it was the truth or not. You know, it was very...
Impressed you.
Yeah, very impressive. And he was never came on hard with his views on anything. I don't know when I, somewhere in an early conversation with him that weekend, or they put us up, as I remember, unless, we went back to maybe High Point, hitchhiked back at night. I don't remember now. Bart could have carried us back.
You didn't stay in the same house with Mother, did you? Overnight?
I don't think so. I don't remember what we did.
I would
I think we
remember
went
that.
back.
Mm-hmm.
I think we went back to Richard's place. And after that, I came up from Charlotte, even after I got a job at the mill part-time, and then later on WNYA kind of school construction, laying floors in a black school.
In Charlotte?
In Mecklenburg County, the county that Charlotte is in. Nevertheless, either using my car or coming up on weekends hitchhiking, I began to, you know, visit there. I was interested in Buddy, there was no question. Mm-hmm. And Bart was a very curious and interesting figure, and never pressed you about anything, like to join the Communist Party, all the things that you'd heard of or figured, you know,
I
was
figured
the
they were
thing.
out for him.
Yeah. And very patient. I remember one point I, in a bewildered kind of way, was describing why it didn't make any sense to just say everything should be cooperative when the best prices seemed to be in some of the biggest supermarkets you could get. And I'd name some prices that were a nickel, something that was like 18 cents or 20 cents elsewhere, that the big stores seemed to be able to do things. He'd very patiently explain that that's just the way it seemed to be until they could win a price war driving out the little stores, and then they would have a better monopoly position and they could make more money across the board. And seldom used any Marxist jargon, although he could explain a theory to you if someone asked about it, like Richard, who had read. And then he might, near the end of a visit, give you a penny pamphlet or a 2-cent pamphlet about something put out by Labor Research Association or by the Communist Party or something else. You know, they were very cheap little pamphlets that the communists. Bart also ran a bookstore, which was very interesting. It was called the LMA bookstore. Ella Mae Wiggins was the name of the martyred mother of several children who was murdered at the Gastonia strike in 1929. And Bart operated this progressive or Marxist, it meant they carried many kinds of books, but they also carried left-wing and communist and socialist books. And it didn't mean that he was there all the time. It meant he did hang out there.
Was new books or secondhand?
Yeah, both. Mm-hmm. And a lot of just communist pamphlets, mm-hmm. So that it was a means that the Communist Party, no doubt, subsidized to have a open front of a bookstore and a place where people could buy their literature and be converted to more of their viewpoint, etc. So I don't ever remember. I remember him giving us things. I don't remember. Wouldn't have had the money to buy anything anyway.
When did you pull the
But
stunt?
students, oh yeah,
The stunt.
the stunt, yeah.
When did that
Now
happen?
I'm afraid this tape's gonna
Oh,
catch you.
that's okay. You can start it, but
We're going back and forth and
we're
staying
going
with,
back to the story that Junior's brought up, or
Yeah, you wanted
you
me to
brought up
tell
when
you
you were
what
talking to
happened.
him.
Mhm.
you want to just go on to the next one?
Well, I think it's gonna get over with here, as you do too.
There's always more on it than it looks.
Okay. At any rate, I don't remember buying anything, but there no doubt were students from Greensboro Women's College, which is today UNC Greensboro, Bennett College, a black college, A&T, a very important black institution, like North Carolina Central and Durham, and a private women's college or two.
Coming to the bookstore?
Well, I mean, yeah, Greensboro was a decent, center. At least it's where he was headquartered and where he had this bookstore. And
No, but he lived in High Point.
no, he lived in Greensboro. Bart lived in Greensboro. We hitchhiked over from High Point.
Oh,
We hitchhiked over from High Point. We were not in High Point. We hitchhiked over from in the country.
okay. It was only later that they moved to High Point.
That's right.
So you met Mother in Greensboro?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, I was
At Bart's
really
house.
confused. Okay.
And at Bart's house. Okay, now, somewhere on one of these later visits, I begin to I guess I'm sitting around looking at Buddy or something. And Bob will say, "Hey, would you do me a favor? Take this girl who sits around here boring me and go down and get me a milkshake or something." He'd hand me a dime. She would be to get me out of the house with Buddy. No.
It'll stop.
He had pleasant little ways, I guess it was befriending me in a way. And in touch with a communist like Bart or anything at that point in time. And I only was because Richard Holyfield had taken me up
Well, I
there.
hadn't realized Junius was younger than you are anyway.
Yeah, he is
By
younger.
about a year and a half.
Yeah, right.
So he came along later more. or
Yeah,
less.
right. Mostly it was his immaturity, if anything,
Yeah.
that cured him of, cured Buddy of them. As I remember. Couldn't keep his hands off her, that kind of. He might be touched, all the time, stroked like a pussycat.
Yeah.
And he needed a pussycat all the time.
That would be a basic conflict.
Well, his mother, apparently, had been a society woman, very fine woman, but, stately or something, and because this seemed to be a need. And I remember when he got married, he'd just sit there and stroke his wife's arm, shoulders, it was endless.
Like a teddy bear. Huh?
Yeah, he needed a teddy bear. Anyway, show you the wildness of young people and how little theory went into people like Richard Holyfield, who read communist pamphlets. I was just beginning to, and
This is a
I really
track,
don't
too.
want to. We're
Should we
going to
take
get
it away?
bees and things. It was sweet jelly.
Yeah.
We're sitting around Richard's drinking beer, as I remember. His old man, by the way, is spinning out many of these wobbly legends to me. He's an ornery old character. And he's a real wobbly, an unreconstructed wobbly. To give you examples, now what are you boys doing down in Charlotte? We'd tell him, well, we're helping Danny organize a mill, and what do you do? Well, we hand out leaflets with him, we do that, and he'd start shaking his head, in a negative way. And never worked, and so forth. And finally, Richard would say, later I learned to ask the set-up questions, but Richard would say, so what would you do, Paul? Well, I'll tell you what I'd do. I'd get me a few buddies like you got here, but a few more of them, and get you some kettles and go down to the corner of Tryon and Trade. That's the two main streets meet in downtown Charlotte. Say Tryon and Trade. Get out in the middle of the street there, build you a fire, and start cooking mulligan stew. And he starts recounting the whole 1912, San Diego sit-down, in which they decide, the Wobblies decide if they're going to arrest their people for, except he didn't wait for any arrests. You see, I forget what had offended him or something. They might jail us if we did this or something, or if we didn't hand out leaflets, stay off their property. He said, no, you can't put up with that. You got to go down the corner, Tryon and Trade, and you start cooking mulligan stew. And then what? Well, then they're going to come along and they're going to arrest you because you only got about a dozen men. Then the word goes out. Who was going to send the word, we never understood either. And he says, then the boys all come in until there's about 100 and something of them there, and they cook their mulligan stew. And then what? Then they'll arrest them. Richard may have served a little bit of time for bad weekend or something, says, but there's only 4 floors, I think, in that Mecklenburg County jail or something, And he says, hey, boy, but you got to overflow them. So some more buddies come in there until you fill it all up, and they say, what the hell does it take? You leave our people alone when they go on the company property, And that's the way you teach them. You teach them the way you do it. Now, if you think he was alone, he wasn't. Randy McNeil later, his father was a Wobbly.
He was the carpenter, wasn't he?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Randy helped build the only furniture that Jancy and Michael knew as children, and my father and Buddy and I used in Greensboro at the barracks in our apartment, which was a converted crude army barracks with 2x4s and 2x6s all showing. Randy's father had somehow accumulated enough money when he settled in Greenville, South Carolina, to buy what was then a downtown block. Not because he had a lot of money, but because probably it was the way I remembered it, but with a cow grazing on it. Except this was now 1938, 1940 when he still had it. So it was only about 5 blocks from the main downtown. And he still sat there with this old beat-up house they lived in, this cow that he milked sitting in this downtown block, probably refusing any offers to sell out, while he would tell his legends of, similar kinds of things. These guys were absolutely unreconstructed, but they didn't do anything about it. Now this, you'll see, I'm just recounting to you my experiences with what Father John Steinbeck, it's in his novels. You see, he's very annoyed that they're useless. In other words, as the migrant workers in Grapes of Wrath have to come along and organize the people, if it's not Grapes of Wrath, it's one of the others, they get in the way. I mean, in California it must have been more annoying because the people were moving in a progressive direction.
Sort of anarchist.
Yeah, that's right. That's very well. They are a type of anarchist.
Create anarchy as a way to solve the problem.
They do, and they are a type of anarchist. You have to realize they don't believe in political action. Mm-hmm. They don't believe in voting. They don't believe in anything. The system has to be brought down. You got to realize they don't believe in real trade unions. They must be destroyed. Mm-hmm. And the Wobblies' model of industrial unionism, which after all doesn't want to sign union contracts, doesn't want to, that would be compromising with the system.
And yet they aren't quite communists.
Oh, they hate the communists. They despise them. They despise them because they're in the electoral process. They believe that you should take power, use the voting process to take power, and teach the workers that they will not let you take power if you fight the capitalists. See, the communists want to teach the workers through the means of saying, see, if you were to elect a majority that wanted a communist government, they would simply shoot you down with their police guns and their armies and all. That's their theory, if you see what I mean. And the Wobblies just don't believe in they just proceed. It is a anarcho-syndicalist type of thing, which I don't understand, you know, the whole theories of it, but in parts of Spain and Italy and Southern Europe, it's has a big following. And in the Spanish Civil War, there was a lot of disruption over trying to hold an alliance of communists, socialists, and anarchists together, because in a showdown, you see their hatred of some branch of, say, socialists that are leading the alliance may cause them to almost go with the enemy, you know. And at any rate, I didn't see any of this then. I didn't understand it. Although, having mentioned Spain, I should say Spain was going on all during the period.
Yeah.
Spain is going on all during this period, and I'm influenced somewhat by it, because it's certainly in the background. I never considered going to Spain. I never was that political. At the same time, people at the fringe of my friendship, people sometimes very central to the ways in which I had come to think, not that they taught me Marxism or anything, but a very fine guy named Ralph Wardlaw, W-A-R-D-L-A-W, from Georgia, was, for instance, a very gentle man. It surprised me one day when he said he was going to leave. He had volunteered for Spain, and he felt very deeply about it, explained to me how he felt. And then I felt very helpless and very ripped up, because he hadn't been gone 5-6 weeks until he was dead, reported dead. It seemed to me he didn't have time to make the trip, to get unloaded from the thing. And I wondered how many of those people had ever been trained, how many of them had had a chance to fire a gun, how many of them were just idealists who arrived over there and were shoved into some unit, taken in the front, maybe slaughtered between a factionalism of anarchists and socialists or something, rather than facing the enemy. Or, you know, here they were faced with hard trained army regulars or Hitler volunteers, you know. But the Abraham Lincoln Brigade, the American brigade in Spain, was receiving, you know, some press notification.
So this Wardlaw would have been part of that?
Yeah, he joined the Abraham Lincoln Brigade.
That's
yeah.
what you joined when you went to
Yeah, you went
training.
if you're an American, and I think the Mackenzie Brigade might have been the Canadian branch. The British had theirs, etc. But these were the international volunteers against Hitler, against Spanish fascism. But Hitler and Mussolini sent organized cadres over there, trained people, and murdered the Spanish democratic government, which had been just overwhelmingly elected to end the monarchy. But because it was socialist and was very close to them, and the democracy stood by, Roosevelt especially was paralyzed by his insistence on a policy of neutrality. He would not take sides between the elected government of Spain and its fascist invaders, you see. So that these were all volunteers who were terribly frustrated at contradiction that a New Dealer like Roosevelt did in foreign policy. It was the beginning of the paralysis in front of Hitler, you might say, follow me, that was going to lead them from not doing that to standing still while the Rhineland had just been invaded,
Right.
then Spain in 36, then whatever it was, Rhineland or something went in 37. 37
All that's
was
easier to see
Austria.
in retrospect, right?
Well, it was
I mean,
seen then in many
was?
ways, yeah. There was great frustration that he did not stand up, that he had
Over
a
Spain
contradiction in his
and-
policy, yeah. And today it's unclear. There are many books on it, how much of it was basically a failure to understand the mass extermination of the Jews, or whether the world cared, or at the beginning, remember, all he claimed he was doing was jailing the communists and the socialists, and didn't admit to the Reverend, Pastor Niemöller and all the others, the Catholic dissenters, all the others he had equally, put away. The world was slow to see. Maybe he was no worse, but it was a frustrating thing. But the rise of Hitler was a absolute force in pushing people to the left. because here was a man that was the opponent of communism. This was the man whose whole platform with Mussolini's was to stop communism, to end communism, to jail their communists and all that. And we were in a country in which it had a definite implication for bringing on the communists as much more heroic figures than you can understand today. In other words, they were standing up against fascism, which clearly, you know, here it was. They were marching from the Rhineland to Spain. Austria, I think, was 37. Then I'm talking about 38. Remember, in 38, they're going to seize first the Sudetenland, the areas right at the edge of Czechoslovakia. And when they test Chamberlain and the U.S. and they don't move on that, then they seize, having seized those 20 counties. That's all we want, just the German-speaking counties of Czechoslovakia. So they give them that, then they use that to seize all of Czechoslovakia, which is not German. And from there came the opening in 39. And the fact that that there are so many debates as to why people didn't equally turn on the Russians in 39, I think it was very not difficult to reason that what the Russians did was march simultaneously. They had waited.
Oh, they wanted their share, you mean?
No.
Of Poland.
I think they had offered the British and French in 38. There were already published papers that they had offered that if you will stop Hitler, we will march from the east. If you will declare war on Hitler so he does not take it, free Czechoslovakia can stand. That was the offer. And when the democracies didn't do that, then there were probably secret negotiations that bewildered all of us, but that ended up with the non-aggression pact. In other words, what they had to do was reach an agreement that Hitler would not invade Russia. What the U.S. and especially Britain under Chamberlain were doing was telling Hitler, you can march on Russia. We will trust you that everything you're doing is to stop communism. That what they were going to do is get destroyed. They were going to encourage him to march on them. So what they did, I don't think it was too hard for many of us to justify. The impact of people living in the...
wondering about
We
the
were
impact
mostly on
of,
local affairs, but then
the wars breaking out.
the way in which the inaction on the Rhineland and then on Spain, so our government, Britain, all of them watched an elected Spanish government, allow itself to, allowed Hitler and Mussolini troops to move in, and just volunteers came from other countries, and then
it pushed people to
Austria,
the left, is what you're saying.
Well, I
Our-
think
our just sitting around watching them.
if you were watching Hitler's, stormtroopers marching and watching the newsreels of the period and so forth, and then the Rhineland, well, that had happened. Then Austria in 37, and they didn't stand up. And then Czechoslovakia was more shocking because the Russian offer was an open one, that they would invade from the east if Britain and France would save Czechoslovakia from the west, if they could scissor it in and save Czechoslovakia, which was, under Benes, I think, a very democratic, broad-centered thing, not at all in the Soviet orbit like it has come about today. Instead, they gave him, Chamberlain handed him the Sudeten, like counties at the edge that were German majority, and then he immediately, with the promise that that's all he ever wanted was a German-speaking majority counties, and he immediately then, with that, and his own troops took all of Czechoslovakia. What happened then, nobody was aware of, and it was a surprise and shocked her. But in retrospect, at that time was despite the way it might shock you today, that when he moved on Poland, and 19 days later, the Red Army moved on the other half of Poland. It announced the non-aggression pact. What was in the discussions also was that the Russians, having concluded that we would not stand up to it, had negotiated with Hitler that if what Chamberlain is telling you is that you can invade Russia with impunity, you know, that we'll make our own. You know, in return for you agreeing not to invade Russia, they took a naive approach. I mean, he did invade Russia later, but they did move in. They did move. They cut their own deal and they moved in, and that was the majority opinion was clearly against a shock to the democratic nations who at least had counted on Russia back in the democracies, you know, at that point.
Didn't that affect the left too? In other words, was there a reaction
It
then?
absolutely split the enormous middle class following that the left had on campuses and things like that. The shock of how can you have a non-aggression pact, you know, with Hitler, and after the years in which.
How did you feel about that? I mean, how did you?
Well, there was no question. It was
You were disappointed.
a very shocking kind of thing, but I can remember Leo Huberman was there, one of the great scholars
It
from
would have been the summer of
Columbia
39,
University, yeah, and I watched him in the throes of the school was going on that last week in August, and he moved from absolute shock and dismay and disgust with the Russians to, and this would influence a lot of people, or Mildred Price, another very distinguished person. They were all in as you'd sit around with it, not all the students were interested in the thing, but probably a third of them were very interested in following their debates, and I don't remember ever saying much. You just listened to them debating it more or less, you know, because it was, they were so much more informed, that, you know, and they were New York Times readers every day. They were those kind of, you know, things that they knew the negotiations. They saw the hints of the way I feel I can judge today with a huge political reading behind me. You follow me? Of what's the implication? That's clearly there's been negotiating. None of this happens without, you know, that kind of thing. We were naive beside them. We were children. What were you, 18, 19? I'm trying to.
Well, by the summer of 39, you would have been 19.
I'm 39. I'm 19. No, 38. 38. This is 38.
So
39. Now this is a year later. Sure, this is 39. You're right. 39.
You're born in
I am
19.
20. I'm 20. Yeah. But you're still, you know, you have no experience for seeing the implications of so much, you know. But I would say after about whatever it took, a week to 10 days before the school adjourned, you could see some shifting sands. Not that they shifted all the way. Some people
A more
remained
sophisticated
adamant.
view of it,
Some people remained adamant. The anti-Soviet from then on, who had not been, and that was the breaking point of a mass left in this country. Up till then, I would say there was all the signs of that. You know, you all would not appreciate or understand of how much influence there was. You know,
that the communists
in the
had.
prestige, of the left by what they had done, probably. You know, volunteering in Spain, seemingly self-serving. You know, and all these kinds of things. So that Ralph Wardlaw, you know, surprising kind of guy I just admired, but he, you know, gave his life in Spain. I didn't know why.
You don't mean
Country boy
self-serving,
from
you mean the
Georgia.
opposite.
Yeah, the opposite. Yeah, they were
Self-sacrificing.
self-sacrificing person. You know, why would he give his life in Spain? I was just puzzled, you know. But he, you know, explained it to me, and then he was dead in about 6 weeks, you know. I felt it was a real waste, because I don't think he had time to train to use a gun. He didn't know anything. They were just idealists thrown into, you know, frontline combat with infantry. But there was no question Roosevelt was not a central figure. He had played a very, he had never played a foreign policy role that equaled his domestic role. In other words, until we got into the war, he had never, his like neutrality policy, as it was called, he was reflecting the backlash that most of us, we were anti-war. You saw it out of World War I, you were anti-war. That was
that's where Lindbergh, I guess, was getting a lot of his following.
America First, came along in there at around 1940. They become very
Did you say
prominent.
that's how Roosevelt felt too? He was kind of
No, not like Lindbergh. No, he opposed Lindbergh, because by then Lindbergh is opposing Roosevelt for, see, Lindbergh is America First, but anti-British. He's picking up an anti-British line, and remember, he's going to review the German Air Force and go to Berlin. I mean, Lindbergh is more going to become a very polite American front against Roosevelt that the Nazis are going to be very grateful for. So this became mixed up in it later, too. You got to realize right after that came this kind of movement in which you again were talking. Wilkie's campaign in 1940 was an ambiguous kind of campaign. Was he an echo of Roosevelt? You know, what was he? Was he a real opposition? There were, I wasn't into it enough to, you know, remember, but there were all kind of implications along that line, like there were bigger issues, but he wasn't making them and might have made them, etc. More than Republican, you know, Democratic Party ones. And
you were just pretty impressed to be sitting around talking about this stuff, right?
yeah,
I mean,
yeah, there's no question about it. You were just, and I was always with much older people. I was always sort of very close to the very youngest person there, because occasionally was Richard Holyfield, I like a buddy like that, but then Richard didn't return in 39. Now, you asked me about Buddy.
I wondered how she got to this.
Yeah, well, by then I had begun dating her in 38, and then I returned to Texas in December. My mother was at Wichita Falls, and I went to work in Dallas, Southwest Tablet Company, a factory. Well, you went to, each morning you got up early and you sort of went to plants to see if they were hiring. And
how come you went back to Texas? I'm just curious, because you're in North Carolina, hanging out with Richard Holyfield, kind of going back and forth between
right.
Charlotte and Greensboro, seeing Bart.
And Rowena, my mother, has gone to Wichita Falls, Texas.
So you kind of went back to see her?
Well, yeah, I think it was, I guess, I remember saying goodbye to Buddy, you know, and so forth. And I don't think she thought I'd stay in touch with her, but I did. I stayed in a very close male touch with her. Well, no, I'm sorry. Let's get this in sequence. In the fall of 30, I got to get it in order. What year are we in? 38.
38, fall of 38.
38, okay. In the fall of 38, Buddy's at Greensboro.
I was wondering if she went home to take care of her dad or
Yeah,
something.
that's what happened then.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, that's what happened then.
Okay. Let's make
She
it sense
goes, her father is ill and she's going to go home.
then. Right.
But coincidental with that, Bart is driving a little Henry J. That means Henry J. Kaiser, a little Kaiser. One of the Kaiser had started an auto company. He's driving a little Kaiser. And he invites several of us to go with him to the Southern Conference for Human Welfare. He's one of the very few communists there. Identifiable communists might be more accurate, okay? Rob Hall, he, maybe a couple more.
Where was it held?
In Birmingham. It's a very famous conference,
uh-huh.
Southern Conference for Human Welfare.
Is that the one Eleanor Roosevelt was at?
That's right. Mrs. Roosevelt is there. Virginia Durr, obviously. You know, you meet a lot of enormous people, about 1,500 or 2,000 prominent New Dealers for the most part. Congressman Patrick from the Birmingham district. It's like a host.
Oh.
A very big conference. The biggest one I'd ever attended. There were also some humorous things there. We're driving. Who was along? Bart had done the inviting. Okay. I was along. Buddy went as far as Atlanta, and he put her out. She deeply resented this. She told me later that he didn't better protect her. It was the middle of
Put
the
her
night.
out in the middle of town somewhere.
Yeah, that he didn't look out for her welfare better, but I was unaware of it and so forth. Along in the car were, as we went along, as I remember, we picked up some people. It started out with Buddy and me, and she's got her suitcases, I guess, in the back end or something. She's going to go as far as Atlanta, and we're going on to Birmingham, to the conference. Red Hendricks, we picked him up in High Point. Red Hendricks is a very prominent victim, penitentiary victim of the Gastonia strike. He's been charged with murder. 5 strikers have been charged with murder of the chief of police of Gastonia, North Carolina, during the 1929 strike. And Red is a flaming, a very red-faced, very red-haired, striking,
Appropriately named.
yeah, a very striking mountaineer who had come to work in the cotton mills for years and had become a very leading member of the Communist National Textile Workers Union. In 1929, when the Communists did not have the CIO, there's a squirrel, if you want to see, there's the first of them. All these, not only are the acorns not going, the hickory nuts are not being eaten, okay? But I see there's one close enough. They'll be coming in when they finish the next yard. Anyway, he, Red is a colorful character to have along. He's got his own odd sense of humor. He's just wry in his own way and so forth. Now, what he did was jump bail. Red is one of several men who jumped bail and fled to Russia, the haven, the workers' haven for persecuted workers, and went to work in Russian. Red Hendricks has jumped his bail and run away to Russia to avoid.
Getting ready to go.
Oh, okay.
I think we're on the way to Atlanta.
Yeah, and in that car, I can't remember. Red we picked up in High Point, and he's humorous. Red Hendricks ran away to Russia. He got lonely for his wife, Bertha, and came back to serve his time, which he served in the penitentiary at Raleigh for whatever number of years that required, but he was out by the time I met him in 1938. He had probably come out a year or so earlier. Probably greeted by Bart if he was in the state at the time. At any rate, Red was a celebrated martyr, or, you know, of one of the great workers' struggles in labor history, the Gastonia strike. The first time Southern white workers, mountaineers, had shown they would follow the straight Communist Party line. I mean, it was like an example.
I wonder if he knew John Reed.
John Reed would have been an American figure in Russia who would have been dead long before he got there.
Oh, that was, what, early 20s?
John Reed was a man who
Before the 20s.
died before he was 30 or something. He was totally different.
They
John
didn't
Reed is
overlap.
an American who was attracted to the early Russian Revolution. Red was one of
That's right.
the people, not many of them, that he never talked much about Russia either, so you questioned him about it, which meant that I doubt that even though he remained loyal to the Communist Party and the Russian Revolution in a generalized sense, that he was that struck with it, he would have liked to have lived under the
It was
Russian
mainly a place
system.
to jump bail.
Yeah, he jumped bail to until he missed his wife enough, and then he came back. At any rate, he was out. She was working in a cotton mill. He was blacklisted and couldn't, or his health, he was coughing a lot, might have had TB. He was in the car. Buddy and I were in the back. Red was there. And then we stopped in Greenville and picked up someone named Ernest Jones, who later appears in my history. No, don't I know Ernest? Ernest Jones is either at the 38 or 39 sessions of the Southern School for Workers. I don't know whether
You knew him or didn't know? You're not
I
sure you
didn't
knew
know
him?
him, but he was a textile worker.
Then he must have come the next
He was
summer.
a textile worker, and he was a holy roller. He was a Church of God member, and some kind of left-wing activist, again, probably out of a communist-led strike, probably in a textile mill. You see, the loyalties run extremely deep. I mean, if the only people who ever befriended them, when the AFL deserted them, say, and tried to turn them into craft unions, or something else, or didn't give them support during a strike with the communists, then I don't know what his loyalties were based on, but they were definitely partnering. I didn't. He later appears because I know at something at the Southern School for Workers, there's a very clear picture of he and I together talking at a table, mapping out something, an outline or something, and that later is to be used, Dave Moose claims, as evidence against him. They think it's him. A guy named Dave Moose is a very phony guy, in my opinion. Although they both are blonde, they both are very blonde and blue-eyed, but it's not Dave Moose. This is Ernest Jones. Ernest Jones also has a habit, as holy rollers do, of as he gets excited, he doesn't talk very much, but when he does and begins explaining something, especially in a meeting, as you hit the floor, of swinging into speaking in the unknown tongues, the way holy roller people do, see, as the Bible says, to speak in unknown tongues is, a sign of Holy Ghost being in you. And the holy rollers, very often do that, begin just speaking in a trance, and so Ernest could be, without meaning to be, quite entertaining, but, we would all, Richard and I and others, would imitate him. At any rate, after we let Buddy out, we proceed on to Birmingham and get in there probably, if we let her out late enough at night, maybe 10 o'clock at night, maybe it's 3:30 in the morning.
That sounds like her story.
And we're cruising around, and remember, she's got to go find her brother Charlie. He doesn't
To get a
try
ride up
to think he wouldn't try to find Charlie's house and let her off instead. He lets her off near a bus station, or something. I think guys try to make her in the bus station or something, while she waits for morning, I guess, to figure out what to do. She can't be walking all night, he said, we got to get on, he's tired of his sister-in-law or something, And, I guess there was a certain, I don't say cruelty, but, in her mind, that was an injustice, because she's always babysat for him. She's done everything she could for him. Also, we arrive in Birmingham now in the middle of the night, very late, and cruise around, locate whatever the auditorium where it's to be, and then realize it's not a nice residence as you would expect. It's in a, it's in a sort of big boarding house neighborhood or something, semi-industrial, I don't remember now. And Bart locates a place that says rooms, it's dark. And we go in, And then another one of the humorous episodes, I didn't finish the one with Holyfield. We got distracted of this trick we pulled on Bart.
You want to go back to that
I
now?
will. Well, we can go back to it, but let me tell you this one since we're at it.
Mhm.
So they go in, whoever gets out of the car, I don't remember. One of the older people, Bart or Red, and they rent. As I remember it, they just got us all into one room. They rented one big double bed for two, another big double bed. I haven't counted up whether it were 4 or 5 of us. And and we dead tired, my age, all asleep. In the morning, I wake up to quite a commotion. What they've done is, with a little bit of knowledge of foresight, or they have it by morning, is rent. I don't know that they knew it the night before, but they might have suspected it, because these girls have arrived in the room, and this is a whorehouse. And it's Depression, remember, so they got the room for probably $1 or something. It's 1938, and I'm the butt of waking up to this thing. You follow me? Laying there in your shorts, and come on, right? I mean, the girls have come to see, Bart.
They come right into your room?
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, whoever went out to the bathroom or, down the hall or something, realized what it was.
But not in your room. It's just
in our room, yeah, right in my room, pulling the covers off of me.
Oh, gee.
I don't mean they did anything. It's that the clowning, I'm waking up to this enormous, being the butt. See all these guys dying laughing. And
you mean they got some girl to go in and pull the covers
there's
off?
3 or 4, yeah. They're
They
pulling
put
the
'em up to
covers, and they're saying, here he is, here's the guy, whatever. I don't even remember.
They put some girl up to it.
Several of them are in
Several?
there. Several girls are in there, okay? And it's a joke, because, it's morning, and none of them probably are interested in, in going to sleep with a prostitute or anything. They want to, I guess, get going, have breakfast, and just figure out where we are and the meeting's starting. But the point was, they got their jokes out of, of making me the butt of the things. I woke up and had to react to, God damn it, trying to cover up like a little vain girl, covering myself up with a towel or a sheet or anything I could grab hold of. And leave me alone, and all this. And the girls played their little part by trying to rip it off of me. And so that was the story of the boarding house in Birmingham. Now, before I go on to tell you about the Southern Conference, which was a historic meeting, one of several, I want to go back and tell you about how really idiotic 2 young boys can be back at Richard Holyfield's place. In that fall of '38, somewhere.
It was before you had met Bart, I think.
No.
Oh.
I don't.
It had to have been.
Maybe it was. Then maybe it was when we first got there.
When you first got there.
When we first got there, we're listening to the radio and we're drinking beer. And something in the High Point Enterprise, the newspaper there, has something about, who knows, it's some statement about communism. And we began, I did an imitation of a Japanese ambassador that used to make people hilarious,
Like how?
We stand for the peaceful occupation of the Chinese peninsula. It's a very large peninsula, extend 2,000-3,000 miles into mainland. This peninsula will furnish Japan much resource for development of very fine peaceful intention in Asia. Asian development, very, very important. And so forth, And Richard would do one of his, we're just fooling around, clowning like kids do,
Right, trying to
stuff
make good
that
sense
you do.
of it.
Yeah, and you're dating girls, and they all go crazy over this stuff, and making fun. And we'd listen to something on the radio, we'd always imitate it. We're just horse playing. Something either came over the radio or was in his father's High Point Enterprise. Mr. Holyfield took the High Point Enterprise in order to curse it. so that it was, it wasn't that bad, but it was,
It's a local paper.
local paper, yeah. So whatever it had a statement about communism. Who knows? It was not a local statement, but it was something about, I can't even place it, okay? But we begin hustling that statement a little bit, and then we get the grand idea, which I carry out, as both of us hustle it to a point. He amends it and refines it, and then I do a little bit, and he's a joker and I'm a joker, and we're carrying on. And what it becomes is, some of these people know me around here. Mike, why don't you do it? It's the idea that it's Saturday night. I remember it was Saturday night. The Sunday paper, it's going to be a Sunday Enterprise. I think it's an afternoon paper, doesn't compete with the morning Greensboro paper in the same county. But on Sunday it competes. And he says they're always down there working, I know, and he knows some people. So it's maybe only about 8 o'clock, 8:30. And they're not going to put it to bed till 11. And what it becomes is a ridiculous, to our mind, just a fantastic takeoff on whatever this other thing is, except that I'm calling up to release the statement on behalf of the Communist Party, District 7 I don't even know its numbers, if it has districts, like the Union.
You mean you act like you're calling up to
Yeah,
release a
right, I
statement
do.
for
I
them?
call them up. I
Well,
call
what
up
do
the
you say?
newspaper, and I want to read you a statement for the Communist Party, our position on this thing. And I don't remember what it was. It's just outrageous, because we're both in between the guys. Guys, where did I get a pencil? Where did I put it? And the more he does that, the more we drink more beer and go off the line, dying laughing, and make it wilder. We amend it wilder. Whatever the hell we were saying, we go from 1,000 to 10,000. We
It was
intend,
something Junior said. You said that they were coming to town, or you made some...
we are going to blanket Guilford County and the High Point area with house-to-house leaflets, just any, whatever it was part of a hell of a shape, you follow me? Either he didn't
put
do
Bart
it,
in a hell.
he denied me. Anything he said was wrong.
You didn't even know Bart.
Didn't know who he was, had no idea.
Did you know he was there?
Anybody else would have immediately, had nothing to do with me as the worst enemy.
But
of the
Holyfield knew
Communist
Bart.
Party. Holyfield knew Bart, but he was
So
clowning.
he
We
knew
both-
what he was doing, but he was just too
Yeah,
many
and it
years.
shows you what kids that age, are capable of doing. I was not an enemy of the Communist Party in any way. It was just, everything's ridiculous to kids
Yeah,
that
right.
age. and you don't give a damn. And, what the hell, you take your car apart and lay it out. Think of doing that. Only Mohammed does it today anymore. I mean,
Yeah, right.
we always have my car laid out in all of its parts on the
It
ground.
would be a bunch of chips.
And then we
today.
started back over, you follow me? Put the car back together. Then we'd look at each other. We forgot to put the thing in. We'd die laughing. We'd put some
major
central
part.
gasket that's going to pump oil all over the place. You've got to start all over. What the hell? Just get your wrenches out, you start all over.
Right.
Today you wouldn't think of doing anything like
No.
that. But not only because of electronics, just it's ridiculous. But what the hell? You're out
It
of
was
work.
a simpler machine.
Yeah,
You
you're
had
out of
more
work. When you
time.
get work, you get 2 days work a week,
Yeah.
you have 3 days work a week, 21 hours on the year.
You had
That's it.
time and no money.
Yeah, right. You're laying in flooring, you're
Yeah.
carrying pieces of flooring out. They don't care. Start your fires with it. You got a wood stove,
Yeah.
Everything's sort of simple,
Right.
I must be feeling better than I was that other time.
Seemed like you are. Got there.
Now, I'm getting tired, I guess, but I'm not.
Well, we can take a break here.
Let me see where we are. Anyway,
Up to Berkeley.
whatever I did, there was a commitment part of it. It was like, we will blanket this, or we will do something.
Put Bart in a bad light.
Oh, yeah, door to door will be our reply to people who,
Then did Bart know you
attack
had
our
done
party
this?
in this scandalous thing. Well, nobody knows about it except our idiotic laughter, you follow me? You got to realize, first of all, that Red Hendricks wakes him up. What the hell is this, Bart? I mean...
This is like the next day.
I guess, yeah. Now, we're on our way over. I guess he's taking me over to introduce me.
To introduce you.
Yeah, now, it can't be the same thing. Something's wrong, because I told you we met Bell at that conference and went home.
Right. So it may have
So
been a few
some-
days before or a
Could have
week
been before, yeah. And why he didn't curse me out at that point? Well, it's because he doesn't know it yet. I guess somehow the story comes up later. See? I'm not sure that Richard Holyfield associated with Red
Did you-
Hendricks. or
you knew
anything.
it,
Red
you
was
knew it.
more of, Richard was an irregular sort of, so to speak, you know, a sort of a drifter.
But didn't you feel funny when you meet this guy, Bart?
Yeah, I
That he's
don't
actually-
remember. I know Bart took it in a gracious way, so that I was very delighted. In fact, Richard, as I remember, we died laughing, but it was, Bart had to know it was somebody's prank. I mean, it
Right.
was not hostile in a sense of, the Communist Party's an outrageous organization that ought to be put in jail or something like that. It wasn't anything like that. It was more of an idiotic statement of some program they were going to carry out that they were not going to carry out. Which I don't even remember now, or anything about it, except that we were having a great time drinking beer. Well, anyway, that gives you an idea of how seriously we took